So I'd like to thank all the team, the curatorial team at TBA, and inviting me over here, and for all the hard work organizing the whole day. So yeah, without further ado, I want to start the story. Actually, I mean, my previous colleague kind of paved the way for me by bringing up this like historical perspective on mobility. And so I want to approach the subject also in a similar way. And so my previous colleague explained like how it was, historically kept happening. So I want to kind of correlating two stories. I want to bring the subject to, actually this is not a crisis. And I want to approach this like an anti-crisis, because when we approach something as crisis, then we have to delegate the power to the authorities, to the police, to the governments, but that's not what we want. And so we as the people, like, we want to live together, and this thing is now happening, so we have to find our way. But if we frame it as a crisis, then the police steps in, and the government steps in, and the politician steps in. Okay, so I want to start my story with the first crisis, maybe, the first catastrophe. So this is we are looking at the border of the Armenia and Turkey. And that pink weird structure is a nuclear power plant just on the border of Turkey and Armenia. It's an area called Metsamor. And so these two circles, big red circles, are two major earthquakes which happened in the history. One in 1986. And one in 2011. So one in Yerevan and the other is in Van, in the eastern Turkish border. And this area is very interesting. It's almost like a bus crash of this human history, civilization. It's an archaeological area before Christ 3000. And it is between two sacred mountains, Ararat and Aragat. So Ararat is, as you may know, is the holy mountain of the Armenians, but today within the political borders of Turkey. And also the Noah's Ark, as we know from a lot of religious texts, happened to land on the Mount Ararat. So this is the first home of the first catastrophe of the humankind as we know it. So it dates back before Christ 3000. So the reason why I was searching these kind of places, because I want to quote, actually it's very fresh, I was just reading this on the plane when I was coming here. It's a very recent book from Timothy Morton. The book is called Dark Ecology. And in the beginning of the book he says, art is thought for future. So the artist is trying to think for the future. So in order to think for the future, I was looking at the past, and I found these archaeological phallic sculptures, which are dated back to Bronze Age in Armenia. And by using a Geiger counter with a radiator detector, nuclear detector, so I started drawing the nuclear mobility of these archaeological structures. And since they are very close, so this green area over there is the Metsamor Valley, which is home to this archaeological findings, these phallic objects. So like almost 5,000 years ago, while people were building this, they had a thought about future, and now the future is now. And I have a thought about future, because I'm thinking that these material, being on a nuclear site, will be keeping this radiation for 2,000 more years. So that's why I wanted to juxtapose the deep time with the future time, and so these phallic objects juxtaposed with their nuclear picture, let me put it that way. So, I mean, the other reason why I was strolling around this area, I was looking for signals. I was looking for, radioactive signals. I was looking for cosmic rays. And so this is one of the world's largest satellite dishes, which is located in the second sacred mountain called Aragat. It's the sister with Ararat. And also there's a cosmic ray detection center. It's exactly the same as they have at CERN in Switzerland, but this is totally not funded, and it's run by two kind of pissed off amateur physicists. And I've been traveling around this area. I've been photographing these cosmic ray detectors, and when I was driving around, it's a very beautiful landscape and between these mountains, and I happened to come across with the human mobility, because it turned out that a lot of Yazidis who are running away from the south are taking refuge in Armenia, because it's it's a very easy place to live, actually. I mean, it's kind of a poor country, it's landlocked, but on the other hand, it is out of natural resources, and for a Yazidi group, it's very easy to live in the mountains. So thinking from there, I started researching about the apricot, because when it came to the when I wanted to connect this issue to the recent mobility going on, there's a saying in Turkish: if something is good, you say, better than this will be apricot from Damascus. And it's the highest positive connotation in Turkish you get. Bundan iyisi Şam'da kayısı, that's how you say it. And so I was thinking about that, but I knew that actually apricot is from Armenia. So apricot is a symbol of Armenia. Like Yerevan Film Festival is called Apricot Film Festival. And then I went back and researched actually in biology. Apricot is called Prunus armeniaca, which means Armenian plum. Because Armenians are the first people who grafted the plum and turned it into a sweeter thing, apricot, which can hold a lot of potassium and sugar. And then I went back and looked at the colonial archives. So this documents like from 1850s, and they talk about the production of apricots in Damascus. And then I came to realize that, oh, okay, so that's why we call it like, when something is good, we call it like apricot from Damascus. And in parallel to that, I started reading about the mobility and exile, and it turned out that actually, if I want to find something positive about this mobility, Edward Said's thinking is very relevant, because he's arguing that exile is strangely compelling to think about, but terrible to experience. So this is the negative positioning of Edward Said. But on the other end, modern Western culture is in large part of the exiles, emigres, refugees in the United States. Academic, intellectual, and aesthetic thought is what it is today because of the refugees from fascism, communism, and other regimes given to oppression and expulsion of the dissidents. So, I mean, it is maybe terrible for the person who is experiencing it, but on the other hand, if you follow Said's thoughts and if you follow the apricots, actually it is what created what we know as modern Western culture today. So I digged a little more deep into these documents, and I found out like the whole numbers and the history of apricots. And so it turns out that like a lot of minerals, a lot of pigments in terms of the art history, a lot of yellow pigment is extracted from the apricots. And so they will travel from Damascus to Istanbul and Izmir, like Constantinople and Smyrna around those times. And it will be transported to Greece, Venice, and Alexandria to Egypt. So basically it's the same path that we are observing today. And also, I mean, this is like the whole geopolitical situation right now today is kind of a jigsaw puzzle, and we cannot really think one thing separate from the other. So, you know, with the genocide in Anatolia, like a lot of Armenians had to move to the west. It's kind of a, you know, opposite movement from Anatolia, where a lot of people are trying to move from east to west. So it's kind of a jigsaw puzzle between Armenia, Middle East, and Turkey. And so the zine part is kind of a long story. I don't want to take a lot of time with that. But when I was thinking all these ideas, I thought that maybe it's the best form of showing this is not a museum, or maybe it's not a gallery, but if we could make these zines. So I brought some of them here on the table. So on the way back, you can take one. And and I was lucky to get a grant, and we hired a translator to translate Turkish and Arabic from English. And so we commissioned some other artists, and we created like a series of zines with my partner in crime in this project, with Dilek Winchester. We created 16 issues, trilingual. So today I want to talk about one of them, which is, to me, is symbolic for this jigsaw puzzle that I'm talking about within the region. And so it is called Apricots from the Damascus Room. It's not from Damascus, but it's Apricots from the Damascus Room at the Metropolitan Museum in New York. Because, I mean, living many years in Turkey, I never visited Damascus, but living 5 years in New York, I am exposed to a lot of culture, Arabic culture, through all these cultural institutions. And actually this is kind of a statement about like how we are really experiencing these cultures through mostly Western institutions. So I paid a visit to the Metropolitan Museum, and so this is the Damascus room in Metropolitan Museum. And this Damascus room is donated to the Metropolitan Museum by an Armenian archaeologist and a kind of a wealthy person, Harok Kvarkian, and in 1968. And so he's an entrepreneur, he's an archaeologist, he's an art person. So I started looking at the art because I started looking at the maps, like how this whole thing is located. And then I started following a path. So I start from the Damascus room. This is the museum map in my hand, and George Washington is on it. And on it, there's like an application that you can download at Metropolitan Museum. And talking about modularity, and I'm looking at these green light structures, the modularity in my presentation is about these Islamic patterns, which are totally about modularity. And I started examining them a little closer, and I write like little JavaScripts, which kind of tries to imitate what I'm seeing within these rooms, these abstract geometric figurations in this Islamic art. And so, of course, I'm doing this with a computer program, but I wanted to juxtapose 3 levels of code. In this one, like one is the computer code, which draws these abstract figurations, and the second level is the architectural code. I'll come to this. And the third level is the genetic code. I'll also come to that. So this is the story of the Hagop Kevorkian, who is an Armenian born in Kayseri. Kayseri is a city in Turkey right now, but used to be an Armenian city, and who went to Robert College, which is the prominent American high schools in Istanbul. And if you leave this room, the next room is the Koch family galleries. So as you exit from the Damascus room, you find yourself in Turkish room. So it's actually, and I've started figuring out that actually Metropolitan is, with its layout, is kind of figuring out the same, they're representing the same jigsaw puzzle. They're looking at the same geopolitical situation. And in an interesting way, if you look at the Koch family, it's one of the Rockefellers of Turkey, rich families in Turkey. They went to the same high school with Hagop Kevorkian. They went to Robert College. And they donated this Turkish room. It's called the Koch Family Galleries. And, their collection holds a lot of Turkish, carpets, rugs, and, a lot of, again, abstract patterns and, modular structures. But also there are a lot of pieces, again, from Syria. But for some of them, they don't even know if it is from Syria or from Turkey. It's from the Ottoman times. And I started realizing, actually, there are some missing tiles. Like these are maybe 200-year-old wall pieces. And the Metropolitan people, they try to complete those pieces with a pencil. And trying to figure out this, complex algorithmic pattern in Islamic art. So I was kind of doing the same thing with my computer code. And so this actually explains the path on the museum map, which I scanned. So you start from 461. 461 is the Damascus room. And as you pass through 455 is the Turkish Koch family galleries. Then you take the elevators. Then you have to pass through 153, which is the Greek alley. And there are all these ancient Greek sculptures in Metropolitan Museum. And if you can make it through the 153, then you're in the west. You can go to Fifth Avenue, Central Park. And so that's why we have these little heads. So there are also some missing pieces. And so this is the Greek alley. And so I wanted to put the water in between. So this is the fountain in the Damascus room. Now it's sitting in the Greek alley. And again, there is this code which creates these, juxtaposed with this animation. And finally, if you can pass through this one also, then you can see the facade of the Fifth Avenue facade of the Metropolitan Museum. And on the right-hand side, you can see the genetic code of the apricot from Damascus. So I literally picked one dried apricot and I sent it to a genetic research center in New Jersey. And I asked for them to give me the whole genetic code, but it's a lot. So we agreed on just one particular gene, which is eukaryote, which is responsible for the immune system of the apricot, which helps the apricot to survive in different conditions, which helps the apricot to survive in its journey. And so all these, maybe you're familiar with from your biology high school classes. So these are different amino acid sequences which provides the immune system to the apricot. And finally, so this was like a sketch that I showed you. It's the zine. So this is very easy to copy and disseminate. And finally, in Istanbul, this took a form of the installation following the same path as we passed through one room to the other in the Metropolitan Museum and basically crossing over this geopolitical map that we have today. And yeah, and finally, it was a coincidence, and it won't show this in this animation, but very on the right-hand side, this installation was installed in a building where there's a window, and from the window you could see Istanbul. So after the Metropolitan Museum, which is the only colored picture, you could see the Golden Horn. So this was the simple narrative of this installation and the zine project. So just to conclude, to me there are a few strong connections with these stories and with these green lights. The one is very obvious one, the modularity in these structures, which is also very prominent in the Islamic art, as we are today experiencing in different ways, like all these web design or algorithmic drawings and Java processing. All this world sounds like very high tech, but actually the algorithmic thinking, the systemic thinking is coming from the East. And so these modular structures, which are an homage to one of the followers of Buckminster Fuller, and the architect's name is now escaping from me, but so they're all coming from the same school of architecture, has a lot of roots in this kind of systemic thinking. And the other thing is about the time. So as I said, in the beginning of the presentation, I really like this reference to Timothy Morton. He's saying, art is thought for future, and with this juxtaposition of the, things which sounds us to high tech, like the Java programming or genetical sequencing or radiation, but actually they all have their roots in the deep history in archaeology, and they're all kind of merging within this geopolitical region, which is today that we are experiencing. Thank you. Is there time for questions?